6:30. And the reason it's me calling the meeting to order is because we have not met to reorganize since our annual meeting. So we have some new membership, and I just want to make sure that we're all, I think we're only missing one. So we have Sarah.
Recording in progress.
It's okay.
Sarah, Shaylee, Polly, Mary, and who are the two we are missing for the new SU board member?
We've got Kat on the big screen, and Aaron is not here tonight.
Okay, so I want to make sure we know exactly who is on the SU board now, since each of the local districts have reorganized. So this is our first meeting. I'm going to start off the board reorganization by accepting nominations for SU board chair.
I will nominate Mary Niles as board chair if she'll have it. Oh, do you have to do Robert's rules first?
No.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we're going to do this by roll. All in favor of appointing Mary Niles as FNESU board chair. Kat? I can lip read that was an aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mary. I'm going to hand the list down to you.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you, Polly. All right, so then moving forward with our elections, we need a vice chair, and that, so you've been doing in that, right, Polly, or no?
No, I hadn't. Last time it was Emily, I believe.
Oh, that's right, it was Emily who's since stepped off, which you, okay. Well, I will nominate Polly, if you will step into that role.
I will.
Okay, great. We'll do it by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. And then clerk. Morgan, can you remind me who our current clerk is?
I believe
The current was me, and the clerk, yeah.
Want to wear both hats, Polly, or would you
Nope.
prefer?
That was me setting boundaries.
Good,
Good
good.
work.
I
Great work.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. Any interest from other?
So the clerk will explain the clerk roles.
So if both the chair and the vice chair are not here, the clerk assumes responsibility for the meeting. However, with a 6-member board, you don't have a quorum when there are more than 2 people. So you could, if there were 4 of you present, be the person who runs the meeting. There's also some language in statute where the clerk would be the one to send a letter on behalf of the board. So if there was action that the board was taking and you had to communicate that out to the public, the clerk would be the one that would draft the letter.
Oh, right. Yes. So like, for instance, I wrote the letter to give, oh, no, that was the other board, I'm getting mixed up, give permission to use the facilities for Dairy Day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody want to be the clerk?
I'm fine doing it and having the dual role. I certainly don't mind the letter writing, but I don't know if it needs to be separate and distinct.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Okay.
Both. Aaron has served as clerk
Oh, yeah.
previously on the other board, and, you know,
Here.
that happens sometimes.
How, can we go through the process, and then if she is
Yeah.
if she has a dislike for it, maybe we could readjust? Can we do that?
Oh, yes, I thought you were talking to me.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
nominate Erin, and then we can always revisit it. By roll, Kat?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee? Aye. Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. All right. All right, our committees, the policy committee, generally we would send two people. Lynn, remind me who's been doing policy from the SU
So
board?
I actually don't think we need policy at the SU level,
Okay,
because you already have 2 representatives from each of your local boards.
great.
So you'd be duplicating that. Same for negotiations. You would need to nominate for the superintendent evaluation committee.
And how many people would we want on that, 2 or 3?
That's up to the board. Not more than 3.
The evaluation, the superintendent evaluation training. I could do that.
I will do it as well.
Yeah.
And is there a third person who might like to join for that?
Yeah, Shaylee said she would.
Shaylee? Great, all right. Well, why don't we do that as a all-in-one, Mary, Polly, and Shaylee for the superintendent evaluation committee. We'll do it by roll. Kat? Kat?
She
Here.
might be frozen. Oh, there you are.
Oh. Did you hear the nomination on the table, Kat?
No, you guys were frozen. I was literally just typing.
We are nominating myself, Polly, and Shaylee for the superintendent evaluation committee. I'm just going through by roll.
Okay.
Yep, okay, Sarah?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Okay, changes to the charges, Lynn?
I
Can
think
you
that would-
clarify that?
I think that would be that if you had a board committee that had a particular charge and you wanted to modify the scope of what you're asking them to do,
Yeah,
that's what that would represent. So
okay,
it seems like the only active committee you have at the moment is the superintendent evaluation.
right, okay. And as far as voting on a chairperson for each committee, does that seem,
I'll be honest with you, we have not done the committee piece before,
Yeah.
and this is from the VSBA's model reorganization chart.
yeah,
So it sounds like that is something you should do here, so you have a subcommittee now, so you need to do a chair for that subcommittee.
okay. So for the superintendent evaluation committee, we need a chairperson. Polly, what do you, as the person that did the bulk of the
Yeah.
heavy lift
Sure.
on the evaluation, do you want to do that?
Sure.
All right, so that will be Polly, we'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Shaylee,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. All right. So we're moving on to our operational discussions, our regular board meeting schedule, and time. So currently, this isn't not normal for us to have it on the Monday.
Correct.
So Lynn, we've been doing it the third Wednesday of each month, eh?
That's what I was just double checking.
It was the third Wednesday of each month.
Yeah, at 6:30. How does that work for people? Does that feel like, generally that's a good date and time for people?
So you had originally been having your meetings at 6, and I think in one of your early winter meetings, you asked to make the move to 6:30.
Yeah.
So I think that, we have it listed both ways at the office, so if you can confirm third Wednesday and which specific start time.
Well, my sense when we moved it to 6:30 was that especially for working people, it was a really tight turnaround at the end of a workday, family stuff, and getting here by 6. I mean, some of that we structured around one particular board member who's not on the board anymore. So I'm certainly open to hearing if the 6 o'clock is easier and better for folks. It can make for a late, obviously it makes for a later night. Sometimes the meetings can be quite long.
Right, if we start at 6:30. What are you thinking?
Early, late, doesn't matter.
It doesn't?
No.
You're flexible.
Mhm.
What's that? Actually, what do you think, Sarah?
Either one.
Yeah. What about you, Kat?
I didn't hear what was said, but my vote is for 6.
Your vote's for 6? I do 6 too.
6:30, but I agree with you, Mary. I know we had changed it, before to a later start time for someone who's no longer here, so.
Yeah.
So does 6 feel a little bit gentler?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I
because
mean, especially in the winters, not getting home quite as late. All right, so, and we don't need, we can just make these decisions without a vote, right?
You
On
can
the
do it all in a
operational?
lump if you want.
Okay, so we're gonna keep with the third Wednesday of each month, but move it back to the 6 o'clock. We talked about an annual summer board retreat and that Courtney would maybe put out a doodle at some
Okay.
point soon to take a look at what that would look like.
And again, were you thinking one night, two days? What did we do last time? We did a couple, no.
So I think we ended up with 4 because we were trying to come up with the board goals, but I think we started with 2.
We started with 2. I was gonna say, then we spread them
Right,
out.
we decided we needed more work time, so I could start with either like a 3-hour night and see if that does it, or
Mhm.
a couple of 2-hour nights. What's the board prefer?
I'd prefer if we could condense it into one, but if it's content-wise requires 2 evenings, then obviously we can make that happen.
Okay, we'll start with maybe a 5 to 8, and I'll bring in dinner,
Great.
Okay.
as long as I feed you, it's all good, right?
You think people should learn that's how people work.
Okay, as far as our places for posting meeting agendas,
I don't think we should change.
yeah,
We use the website and what are the town clerk?
Schools.
Yep. I feel like that's adequate.
seems sufficient,
Mhm.
okay. Whether we need to discuss whether we're gonna use Robert's rules for small boards,
Yeah.
which I think is a good standard for us, it works well.
The difference between, do you know the difference? Yeah, I didn't know the difference. The difference between Robert's rules and Robert's rules for small boards, which is select board should do, is you don't need a second. Yeah.
And the chair can also vote.
Yeah. Handy when you have small boards, yeah. See, I was like, it's a good idea. Yes.
Yeah, we're good,
Yeah.
okay. Some of these are new, Lynn, to me, this list from the VSBA, identify or discuss and adopt a code of ethics, identify communication practices.
So I have the model code of ethics that we have been using, and I'm going to print those and hand them to you before you leave, because I'll be transparent, I forgot to do that in advance. So we just asked board members to take a look at the code of ethics so that there's no conflict of interest with you as a board member, and you fully understand what your role is and what your role is not as a board member, and where there are situations where you should recuse yourself or not be a part of certain things because of that role. So I'll print those and give those to you. In terms of the communication practices, we have talked about that in the past. When big things happen, we have learned that the media is pretty persistent in trying to contact people for comment. So what we have done in the past is made an agreement that the communication piece would come through me, and that if there was anything that needed to be communicated, that the board chair would be the person communicating on behalf of the board. So is that still the direction the board wants to go in?
I can see you better.
Let me ask a question, would it, thinking about our training, would the board chair solicit the feeling of the board?
They should.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, so with that known, then yes.
I think when I'm thinking about communication, it isn't about taking a stance on something, it would be that an event has happened and the board chair may confirm, yes, the administration is taking care of, as an example.
Right.
Administration is taking care of it, superintendent is working with, X, Y, or Z. General communication that doesn't require the board chair to take a stance, because you can't take a stance as a board chair unless you are with your board.
Right, okay.
All right, and then we've got board development, discuss board development opportunities and attendance.
So I did communicate about that in each of the local district reorganization meetings, and it was really just a reminder about the BSBA and all of the trainings that they put out. They're doing a lot. One of the benefits of the pandemic has been that a lot of their trainings have shifted to virtual, so it is a lot more accessible for people. What they were doing before COVID was offering regional trainings, so they were offering far fewer trainings, and you had to drive quite a distance to participate. So you're all as board members on the BSBA mailing list, so you should be getting communications about that. One to pay attention to is the fall meeting. There's a Vermont School Boards Association, Vermont Superintendents Association fall meeting that generally happens, I believe, in late October, if I remember right. And that's always been a really valuable experience. So you have budget money set aside for board professional development. So if there's something that you want to participate in, and it's coming through the VSBA or another organization and it's related to your board work, you just reach out to us and we can get you registered to pay for those things. So be on the lookout.
Discussing local and statewide education advocacy responsibilities.
So there are oftentimes calls to action that you'll receive from the Vermont School Boards Association as members, and one of the things to just note is you are welcome to weigh in. I often will give you information at these board meetings about really impactful education legislation that's coming up and try to give you some background information. You'll get lots of written information as well from the Vermont School Boards Association, so you can go and you can write your legislators, you could go speak to committees of legislature as a member of the public. If you want to advocate from your board position, you need to do that as a full board. So just a reminder about that you absolutely can go and participate in those things. Just make it known what stance or which role you're communicating under, I guess. It's okay to identify that you are a board member and that you're sharing your opinion about something.
And then our designated newspaper for notification of meetings.
We have not been using designated
Yeah.
newspaper.
Okay. So, Lynn, do we need a motion on all those operational decisions? Oh wait, there are two more on the
Yeah.
back, sorry. A motion to approve, the warrants electronically, yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, our practice has been to scan and email the warrants to the full board, and then once we get 2 okays back, we'll send the checks out. And so we need a motion to
Yeah.
approve the warrants electronically if we want to continue that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lynn, we want to do that separate from the bulk of the operational?
I think you can.
Decisions.
Yeah, do you think that needs to be separate? I think we can just put it all together.
Okay.
And in terms of the essential work, I believe I sent everybody those videos after your local district reorganizations. Will you do that? I'm gonna look back. If I did not, I'll send you out. There's some information on BSBA there's a short video, and there's also information for new board members, and about board roles and responsibilities, so I will send that out.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So, I'm gonna make the motion then to accept all the operational decisions we just went through we'll do that by roll. Kat,
Okay.
Sarah,
Aye.
Shaylee,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. And then it's just those after meeting links for you to send Lynn.
Right.
Okay, great. So then moving on, we have our consent agenda and our prior minutes, which includes the prior minutes and a number of policies. Any discussion, questions, concerns about prior minutes and policy? I have two quick policy questions. Right on page 1 of the 20-page document, seems like it might be nice to qualify what the acronym SAP stands for. Because it's not, if someone doesn't know that language, they're not gonna understand that. So I just thought putting it and then brackets with SAP, just, and then from then on, we can use the SAP.
Which one is that on, Mary?
So right on the first page of the full 20-page
So
document.
E5P?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, E5P, exactly.
Okay.
And then I have to scroll through. I had a question about the truancy piece.
Oh, I had one too on insurance.
And my question was, I'm sorry, I should have made a little note of what page of the 20 it was on, but it had to do with the, like, the 16 and under and the 16 and older split and the kind of differentiation between kind of what is then qualified as kind of truant. Okay, so it looks like it's starting on page 17, and I guess my
Yeah.
question is, can a student who is 16 years of age or older not be enrolled and kind of just like, I mean, they
So
could
this
legally
came
drop
up.
out at that age?
They can legally drop out, but if they don't drop out, they must attend school.
Right, because
So-
it said like if like enrolled in a school, which I kind of was a little confused because they have the choice to not be enrolled, but they need to formally disenroll.
Drop out, right. There's some of this language was taken right from a model policy, and there's compulsory attendance is in state statute. So the language is specific to that, and compulsory attendance is through age 16 because that is when they can formally choose to drop out. However, the other thing at play in the model policy is that DCF has definitions about truancy expectations, and they vary based on the age level and what they will or will not report, so both fed into that policy development, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
My question was, annually the superintendent shall ensure that the school board appoints one or more individuals to serve as a truant officer, and I don't remember. But that doesn't
We have not done it at the board level.
Right, so then I was, and it said that it has to be reported before July 3rd, so I was just wondering if that's the expectation and leave it, if it's not, then maybe the other.
So that's new language that was not in our existing policy, and so it's not formally approved yet until it goes through.
So is this the expectation that happens?
I think that was in the model policy.
It was in the
correct?
model policy.
Is it part of statute, or is it just
I
a
don't
good
know if it's part of
practice?
statute
Yeah.
specific.
So I do have to report out on truancy officers for each district annually, so we
So
know
you
that we
would
have
bring
to.
us a name.
We just have never had to do it through the board before, so
Yeah.
because these aren't live yet, I would bring it to you, and I know we would be beyond the deadline, but we'd bring it to you in August for your first meeting.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion
I just
about
have-
policies?
I just have a comment, Mary, kind of speaking to your first comment about the use of acronyms, because I still struggle with tons of our acronyms and policies, like the one we were just looking at, one stuck out or I don't know, I was scrolling through and it was like LEA. And then I was going back and trying to find like what that stood for. So just kind of throwing it out there, I guess anyone that's writing policies and revising, like just kind of double checking for that we're spelling out any acronym, I think at the beginning of the policy. And then obviously throughout, you can just do the acronym, but I don't know what any of them ever mean usually. So, that's just me. So I'm sure most parents, if they're looking at it, or other lay people, they wouldn't know either.
I appreciate you sharing that perspective, Kat. I actually was talking to someone who's going to present tonight, and said that very thing. We forget sometimes because we're so deeply entrenched in education and what those acronyms mean that we need to stop and remember. So call us out, hold us accountable if we're not doing that as you're reviewing these documents. So we'll bring that back to policy as a good reminder that we need to be careful about the acronyms.
Great, okay. So if there's no further discussion, then I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Pauline?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Lynn, any need to reprioritize
I do not need
the meeting? Okay. So that brings us to our public comment window and our recognition of visitors.
Everybody on Zoom is just spectating.
Just spectating, okay. Okay. Jared, you all speaking tonight?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Welcome.
Jared Valencourt from Berkshire. The 2022 report from Vermont's Executive Director of Racial Equity discussed the growing controversy around school curriculum. She indicated the strategic deployment of disinformation around the country has led to a contrived yet highly contagious panic in many communities regarding what equity-related content is appropriate for school-aged children to learn. She noted that parents around the country are convinced or afraid that a rigorous graduate-level academic discipline known as critical race theory is suddenly being taught to K-12 students. Yet, she was previously reported as saying, overt racism is everywhere in Vermont, and it is up to white people to stop it. She goes on, white people can stop harassing brown people. They can stop vandalizing Asian restaurants. They can stop yelling at black people to go back to where they came from. Regarding education, she said, if you know an educator, buy for them materials or curriculum aids that may be useful in helping to tell stories beyond the lies that we're told about how white people came and civilized the savages and they all eat turkey together. Vermonters also need to acknowledge that Vermont is built on unceded land. She's encouraging learning through specific lenses. Likewise, it was reported that our incoming principal included in an email that systemic racism and classism are at the root of our country's history. And finally, our supervisory union has indicated that we are exploring equity in curriculum through identity lenses. These are not the contrived concerns of parents who are worried about the CRT boogeyman. These are their words. When you view the world through lenses of racism, victimization, and oppression, you will always find racism, victimization, and oppression. Instead of focusing primarily on reading, writing, or math, students are being taught to question the foundations of things through lenses. Our country, society, to question and demonize law enforcement, even to question their own gender. Some teachers have become activists by promoting LGBTQ advocacy groups to students. They consistently provide links to information, some of which openly solicit donations for their causes that include political activity. Are you supportive of these actions? Would you be supportive of teachers who promoted organizations to students that held differing values and beliefs as these? Given all of this, it isn't surprising that the superintendent recently indicated that schools are seeing more violent outbursts, episodes of vandalism, significant disruptions, increased threats of harm to self and others, more defiance, more sexualized behaviors in students, children in pre-K through 12th grade, and an increase in need for services to address these concerns was identified prior to the pandemic. When our incoming principal was asked whether he thought there was a link between an increase in these concerns and the promotion of race and gender theory concepts, he indicated yes, he thought there was. Yet, more of our educators' limited time and resources are being diverted to teaching through lenses and activism at the expense of basic academics. We were failing or barely getting by on math and literacy scores before the pandemic. Scores have only gotten worse. Instead of spending time, money, and resources in promoting ideology which is biased and driven by race and gender-based victimization narratives, efforts should be refocused to ensure that basic academics are taught. For so long as schools continue to teach activism at the expense of basic academics and introduce these ideologies, they will continue to create confusion, build discord, create an atmosphere of hypersensitivity with our students and community, and increase the concerns highlighted by the superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're at our central office spotlight window with Heather Hawkins.
So I'd like to introduce Heather. She is our SEL coordinator, and two Heathers, and they happen to be sitting next to each other. Heather Hawkins is going to talk to you about the work we've been doing around social emotional learning priority standards in the SU. And are you logged in to be able to share?
I am, but
Okay.
it says supposed disabled.
So Morgan will help you.
Okay. Okay. So, thanks for the introduction. I won't introduce myself. I know who I am now. I'm going to talk to you about social emotional learning and Fnesu. I wanted to do a brief, what is social emotional learning, and kind of where we're going. So this is the definition that CASEL, which is the Collaborative of Academic Social Emotional Learning, gives, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's an integral part of education and human development. It really is a process where all young people, and even adults in our system, acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. The collaborative is a nonprofit, nonpartisan collaborative which evaluates programming, curates research, informs legislation, and partners on implementation. This is something I said earlier, it is the premier social emotional learning organization, and it's what we have provided as the foundation for our priority standards. The collaborative has 5 pillars of social emotional learning, and self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Self-awareness is the ability to understand our own thoughts, emotion, values, and how they influence behavior. Self-management is how we can manage those emotions and thoughts and behaviors effectively in all situations to achieve our own goals. Social awareness is the abilities to understand the perspective of others. Relationship skills to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships, and to navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. And responsible decision making, the abilities to make caring and constructive choices about our personal behavior and our social interactions across diverse situations. I'm going to get back to that. Why do we need to teach social emotional learning skills? Historically, we know in our education system that we have expected our students to come in with these skills. And they should have the skills necessary to access their education, and if they don't have them, then we punish them or use consequences to teach them. However, through research and learning, we do understand this is not the case, and as educators, we have to teach our students these social emotional learning skills to ensure that our students access their learning, and so it's the foundation of them being able to access the education that we're providing for them. I had the opportunity to attend Castle's workshop, the Collaboratives workshop, and they had this great picture of a three-legged stool. And how do we promote social emotional learning for students? 3 ways. 1, provide a supportive culture and climate. 2, integrate social emotional learning throughout all of our learning experiences. And really, our teachers do this. We do this in our building. We provide these lessons in their learning experiences. And the 3rd is the explicit SEL instruction, explicitly teaching them social emotional learning skills when they come to school. The history of the social emotional learning work that we've done, that this SU has done, really started in the spring of 2020. There was a team made up of teachers, admin, and staff, and they started the discussion for priority standards for social emotional learning K through 12. In July and August of 2020, a social emotional learning team convened with about 22 staff, administrators, teachers, and students from across our district. A draft was done of a social emotional learning priority standards, completed with about 12 to 15 standards for each grade level. Castle, the collaborative, 5 pillars: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, was the framework for those priority standards. I'm going to show you an example in a second. In November of 2021, last year, I started in this position and met with Jody Valancourt and Michelle Irish, and we met for about 3 hours and pared down the initial standards that the team had started with. Pared them down and kind of combined ones that went together. In December of this past year, I presented draft SEL priority standards to stakeholders for feedback. I went out to all the staff meetings and met with the counselors in our district. In February, myself and Jody and Michelle refined and focused those priority standards again, and then kind of looked at them parallel with the Portrait of a Graduate work that the district has been doing, Michelle's been doing. And Jody, yes. So, also, the proposed priority standards really addressed this SU board's goal for social emotional learning in our district, which is by June of 2027, all students in FNESU will demonstrate proficiency by the end of each grade level band on the social emotional learning priority standards. Then this past March, we invested in a universal screener, the Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavior Risk Screener, the SABRS. I'm going to talk about that in a second too. What are our priority standards aligned with? First, I just want to show you real quick. I know I sent them to the board for a preview, but for the rest of you just to get an idea. So this is grade pre-K through 2. As you can see, these are the priority standards, and then the CASEL, the collaborative, or academic social emotional learning competency is next to them. And that goes all the way up. Excuse me. So our priority standards are directly aligned with the collaborative 5 for social emotional learning. The standards are grouped in each grade band, as you just saw, according to the 5 pillars of the collaborative. And we chose these pillars because of the evidence-based research that the collaborative does. As I said, they're the premier social emotional learning. They present this research for skills to advance our students' social emotional learning, which is pivotal to them accessing their academics, I think now more than ever. They're also aligned with our MTSS model and work, and this is where the universal screener also comes in. Both MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, and social emotional learning are grounded in the premise of supporting the whole child. And that's what the social emotional learning priority standards are really gonna look at, the whole child as well as academics. The priority standards will provide a framework for us, for the social emotional learning instruction, and how and when we can provide those targeted interventions using data to inform our practice with our students. What do they need more of? And it allows for an assessment of the priority standards and other points of data that can drive our social emotional learning work within the multi-tiered systems of support model. Just to add, the universal screener, if you don't know, this is the SABRS, has an acronym. It is the Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavior Risk Screener. So for this work, and to pick this screener, I worked with a team of district school counselors for about 2 months, and we evaluated and assessed probably like 10 different screeners across the board, and chose this one, the SABRS, because it really aligns best with our priority standards, with the collaborative, and with the multi-tiered systems of support. We give it 3 times a year. What does the screener do? It identifies students in need of more intensive supports and skill building. We can use the data to select teaching resources that matches the student's specific or unique needs, and monitor the progress of students and their response to our social emotional learning and our teaching and programming that we're using. And as said before, it is directly aligned with collaborative and multi-tiered systems of support. That's what I've been doing for 6 months. That's it.
So Heather, you shared the SEL priority standards with the board in
Correct.
advance. Do people have questions or comments about the priority standards? The purpose of tonight's meeting is we're hoping to get a motion to approve those SEL priority standards.
I just had a question about when you go grade by grade, and they probably are kind of building upon each other, correct? Like kind of
Correct.
as you go from kindergarten all the way through high school, so they're developmentally kind of appropriate for that tier
Correct.
of age group.
That's a lot of the feedback. We ask them about the vertical progression and horizontal alignment
Yeah.
of them. And then with the high school standards, is still a little work to be done, but me and myself and Michelle and Jody have been looking at how Portrait of a Graduate and their priority standards fit together.
And I'm just curious, in like the day-to-day setting, like in the school, and it's sure it probably varies quite a bit, depending on the age group and the grade level, like is there a point at which the student themselves is kind of understanding the work that's being done and kind of, I don't know, sharing their kind of voice and experience with the work? And I suppose even once you get into the high school level, do you find that there's this kind of, any kind of process where they're like identifying like areas that they think that I'm struggling in this capacity, and kind of that, therefore kind of that buy-in to the work or to the what's kind of needed to support them in that particular realm? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's where a lot of the formative assessment, like assessments, come into, and reflection and self-monitoring and self-assessing themselves, like
Right.
kind of where they are with the standards, and if they're struggling with something and if they're not. And I think there's so many opportunities during the day, not only with the explicit instruction, but the instruction that they get, it's embedded into some of their curriculum, and that they absolutely have that opportunity.
I think part of this is building student self-awareness, and for them to be able to identify that it's okay to feel however you're feeling, and to be able to create toolkits to be able to regulate yourself. And I think that, that's something that historically hasn't really been explicitly taught. So when we see kids who are dysregulated, they often don't have tools that they can access to bring themselves down, to be able to self-regulate. So the purpose is to explicitly teach some of those tools, so we can get to exactly the place that you described, where students can identify what it is that they're struggling with, and they can reach into their toolkit to try to find something that will help, and or be able to communicate, because a lot of times when we see some of those kids that have big reactions to things, they can't really name why, right? Because you just feel it, but you don't understand or know what to do about it. So it's more about the explicit instruction of that to build your ability to help yourself.
I also like the fact that you pared down. And when you said 12 or 15 standards, I was like, oh, that's kind of a lot. But you pared down to like 6, which seems pretty manageable. I think that the biggest number was in middle school, which would seem appropriate.
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes sense.
And what about kind of engagement with families, because so much of the work can happen and needs to happen on the home front. So like, is there an interface with like what's happening in the school and a communication with the students' family, so that if they're trying to work on some of these skills around like identifying triggers or learning those kind of the self-regulation. I mean, I know that in some situations that could be really supportive, and in other situations it may not be. So I suppose there has to be some kind of judiciousness around like how the family is engaged, but it seems also really important.
I think having that communication with home and between the families and the school around what the priority standards and the SEL stuff and how it can be coordinated at home as well. I'm just thinking about a presentation that I have that I haven't gotten to share, and it's due to the pandemic and such, but just like I was working with the family engagement specialists on how can we get some of these really big topics out there. First of all, what is social emotional learning, right? I just did a presentation to you guys and maybe not everybody understood it. So kind of what is it, and executive functioning, how to support that at home as well as at school, and communicating with your school, like different things like that. We were working on some things to get out to the community.
I think that's a next step, because
Yeah.
this is new work. Oh, do you want to take that?
There will be a very big connection too with the rolling out of the portrait of a graduate, because the characteristics that were developed by the students in collaboration with their communities, right, a lot of those characteristics actually relate directly to skills in social emotional learning. And particularly one thing we haven't really talked about a lot is executive function. That ability to kind of monitor your own work, to set goals and break it down into smaller steps, to figure out how your work is progressing towards meeting your goal, to meet your own personal responsibilities, right? All of those things are part of social emotional learning as well, and they relate really directly to those characteristics that the students developed in collaboration with their communities, the town members, the parents, all of those different stakeholder groups that they got communication from. So I think that'll be a really sort of important parallel process, is engaging families in both of those things simultaneously.
The last point I'll just make is we can, like for the academic standards, we can bring it down to the school level, the skill level. For the priority standards, we'll now be able to do that as well. So rather than saying that your child is struggling with executive functioning, we can drill in and say, this is the particular skill that we're working on with your child, and here are some ways we're working on it, so families could actually support at that skill level.
I just have a couple questions, and the last person that spoke before Lynn, sorry, I didn't hear who it was, but that kind of answered my question, I guess. I'm just sort of wondering like how this looks more on the ground level. So like what I'm hearing is a lot of this is just kind of embedded or going to be embedded like in the curriculum. So it's like, it's not like they're just going to guidance once a week and like learning skills. It's more like at the ground level, a broader view. Am I on the right track here?
So I think that this is the ongoing conversation about how do we weave this into the daily instruction. One thing that has been important to me in this conversation, this is not a one and done. This isn't you can have a 30-minute lesson and then we're going to come back to it in a week, because these are skills that we need to practice and reinforce throughout the week, and we need to be able to give reminders. And so I think that our teachers have to be a part of this, and it needs to be a part, not really, it needs to be something that's woven into what we're already doing. Morning meeting, we've talked about as being a really great place for some of this to happen. We've also talked about, could there be opportunities for the school counselor and the classroom teachers to collaborate so that some of this is happening between the two of them, so the teaching is the teacher is included in the teaching part, so the teacher can, as the person who is in the environment all week, do some reinforcing between that lesson and the next.
I can speak to an example my daughter had in middle school. They did basically just how to use a planner and how to prioritize, which sounds, very middle schoolish, but it's exactly what they need. They don't come with these skills, right? And so, but the social emotional piece, yes, that's executive functioning and how to use a planner and how do you prioritize and which piece of homework should you do first, can relieve anxiety for some kids who all of a sudden it looks like a huge snowball, right? And so in those skills that are very ground level, what are you doing in the classroom, can translate into more social emotional learning. So I feel like it's all connected. So that's just one example I saw actually happen.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you. And my second question is with regards to assessing the students and then the 3 times a year, I don't remember the acronym for it, but like, what do you envision that looks like? Like, are these assessments, is that something that's done that the students are actually like engaged in, like, self-assessing, answering questions? Or are we seeing like a whole social emotional section on report cards now where the teachers are reporting, the standards that you've outlined and whether they've met those? Like, what does that piece look like?
The universal screener, the SABRS is the acronym, is given for us to identify at-risk students, and for those maybe we could say, might be missing a skill that we're trying to teach, and we can assess the programming that we're teaching. I'm going to let you answer the report card piece. So it's kind of ongoing
I think that is still, we're not there yet to determine the reporting part of it. I know one way that we can use this is we can connect the data. Tell me if I'm speaking out of turn on this. I think where we landed is the SABR will communicate with our EduClimber system so that when we're having educational support team meetings where teams are at the table, and if there's a child who is struggling, we can dig in and we can look at that data and break it down to the skill level, so that we can be talking about intervention. So we haven't really gotten to the place where we've talked about would we be broadly reporting out on proficiency with those on a report card. I think when you hear about the portrait of a graduate, students will be building a body of evidence because so much of this is tied to the POG.
And we already report out on personal responsibility.
Right, I was just gonna
And
say
so
that.
these social emotional standards that have a clear connection to that already, and so could actually, yes, replace that part of the report card.
And Kat, the screening tool is something that the kids grade 2 and up self-report. And then it's teacher reported for kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten, and first.
Okay, perfect. That was what I was trying to add. But thank you, all of you.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So if the board is in favor, could we have a motion to adopt the SEL priority standards?
I'll move. Great, by roll, Kat,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Shaylee,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. All right, Morgan, you're up with financial matters.
Thanks. I'm going to try to cover some ground. I do not believe that we had this board approve the audit yet, because I think that meeting was canceled.
Right.
So I sent those out to you in March. I'm happy to answer any questions or try to answer any questions on this. It has already been submitted to the feds, but I'm still looking for a motion to accept the FY21 FNESU audit.
I'll make that motion. I roll. Kat?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
I didn't send out an updated financial report today. I'm not seeing any storm clouds on the horizon for the SU budget, and I will get that out to you over the next couple of days. And then the only other thing on my agenda, and it's also on Lynn's, is the central office location update. There is work going on in the Pearly block. They've done a lot of gutting, and I believe they're starting to work on the floors. For the last month, I've been working with their architect quite a bit, and I think we're almost final on the layout. We will probably move in 2 stages. There's a section in the outbuilding, the addition, that is likely going to take more time to get up to speed for us to occupy, but we will have 2/3 of that main building for us, and that will be the first piece that drops. Those of you who know the building, the front part that's on Main Street will stay storefronts. There'll be kind of 2 shallow storefronts. We will have the back 2/3 of that brick building, and then roughly about half of the outbuilding off the back.
So is the intention is to continue to lease where you're at for the other half of the people that aren't moving, or are we moving them home?
So I think we will move all at once, even
Okay.
if there are,
Okay.
it'll be 3 offices and a large conference room.
Okay,
So the conference room we can live without, and
gotcha,
we know how to share offices
yeah,
when we need to.
okay,
So I think the move will happen at once. I will probably reach out to the town clerk in Richford tomorrow about setting up what an extension would look like, assuming that we're not going to move on July 1st.
right,
And they've been willing to have that discussion.
okay.
August 1st is still a possibility, so you're hearing?
And that's, yeah,
And that's it, Morgan?
that's all I have unless you have questions. And then I'll jump in for the negotiations.
Right, of course. I
Conversation.
just had a quick question. In the packet, there was the public plan for the ARP ESSER spending. Was that just information, just kind of informational, this giant 22-page document?
That was me, actually.
Oh, Jody, that was you,
Yep,
okay.
and that's an opportunity for feedback.
Oh,
So there also
okay.
is a link for you to provide feedback.
I saw that, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
Okay. All right, great. So Lynn, that brings us to you.
Okay. So I'm gonna start out with personnel. So you should all have this in your board packet. Jimmy, was this revised after the board packets went out?
Yeah, I didn't do that till Friday. So
Okay.
it's pretty up to date.
Okay, so I need to have you approve some hiring, so I'll go through line by line on this. So Christian DeFranco as a special educator, Kayleen Ferris as a special educator, Lisa Robtoy as a literacy, she's moving from a classroom teacher at Enosburg local money to a literacy interventionist through grants. Kelly Legassi as a 0.8 FTE literacy interventionist at Richford High School. Leah Belitzos, she is currently our district evaluator. Because of some of the shifts that we're seeing in Act 173, her role is changing. So one of the other pieces that we need in 173 is an EST coordinator, so we're shifting.
Educational support.
I was waiting, and Act 173 myself. So that's one of the requirements in 173 is that we have someone at the SU level who does the EST coordination, and we haven't had that lever in place yet. So it makes sense for the skill set that Leah has, for her to be the person that helps to do that EST coordination.
Can I just jump in for people who might not know? So the EST, we talk about the multi-tiered systems of support. And so an EST is one of those supports that you offer kids educationally who may not need an IEP, which is an individual education plan, or special education, but they may need some additional supports, so it's part of that system.
Can I jump in with my
Yeah.
part too? So part of that, with Leah's position now, she's the district evaluator, and because we use what's called the discrepancy model to determine eligibility, you can chime in if I miss anything. So that's, along with this multi-tiered system of support in Act 173, there's a shift in some rules for special education qualification. And one of those is around this discrepancy model, and it's going away. However, last week, the legislature decided that they're going to push this rule change back for a year. So Leah's roles might be still doing some evaluating because the discrepancy model is in place for one more year. But after that, the rule's going away on specific learning disability. So there'll be no more discrepancy model. Instead, we have to use our multi-tiered system of support data to determine if a student is eligible for special education. The other part that is changing in this rule change is adverse effect. So in order to qualify for special ed, you have to have a disability, and the disability has to be having an adverse effect on a basic skill area. Currently, there's 8 areas, and with the rule change, there's going to be a 9th area called functional skills, which incorporates social emotional learning, independent living skills, and one other section, but it's escaping me. But anyway, that will be delayed for 1 year. So we're still staying the same.
So the idea through 173 for Leah is that she'll have access to some SU level resources that she can deploy to schools. So there's that piece, and then also really deeply understanding the process in evidence-based practice. So that's the shift with Leah. Stacy Cattell-Godin has been doing our out-of-district placement students, case management, and we have fewer out-of-district placements because there are not any more out-of-district placements. So for those students who historically would go to a Project SOAR, or Laraway, Baird, any number of placements, there aren't any more openings. There are 2-year wait lists, and they can't hire staff either. So there's not as many students for her to be case managing. So we have, when we talk about that MTSS, multi-system of supports, can I just say MTSS now? You got that one, right? Because it is a mouthful. So one of the things that's really important for us to do is a really good job at the universal level and work very hard to make sure that with the first instruction, our target is 80% of the students get it with that first instruction, and then we can have fewer students who are requiring that intervention or more targeted intervention. So one of the things that Stacy is going to be doing is helping us to really focus in on the academic portion of our MTSS system. So these are just shifts in job titles with some additional days for both of those ladies.
Next,
Sure. It's okay.
So with our multi-tiered systems of supports, when you get to the special ed side, it's specialized instruction. And one of the reasons we're shifting Stacy is to do some more coaching around what specialized instruction is, and she is at Warren Gillingham, which is a structured literacy program, trained, and so she has the ability to help build the capacity around the SU as well.
So additionally, in our ARP-ESSER plan, because we were anticipating, right now they're calling this the Great Resignation year across the country. You're seeing a lot of teachers leaving the profession or leaving roles that they're currently in to go to other roles that they want to try out. So we're seeing a lot of that movement, and we're anticipating a higher than average number of new teachers for the start of next year. We have a lot of work that we're trying to accomplish with our Portrait of a Graduate, with all of the shifts that Act 173 requires of us. So coming into education is a tough job. So we really want to support our new teachers so that we can build their skills and capacities to be successful. So one of the things that, and to hope that they will want to stay, because that's something that new teachers across the board say, is that, when we know this based on the research around retention, when teachers feel supported and that they have a strong mentoring program, they tend to stay in those places. So we are losing Sharon Wright, who has been a wonderful asset to us. She's retiring for the second time. She was a classroom teacher at Richford Elementary School for a long time. I think I brought her retirement earlier this year. So she's not returning in that role, so instead we're using our ESSER money to hire 3 instructional coaches, and we will be using them to deploy primarily for new teachers and some new-ish teachers, because we've also onboarded teachers in each of the previous 2 years of the pandemic. So we're going to be supporting new and newish teachers, and if there are teachers who are struggling, the instructional coaches can also be assigned to them. So that would be Leslie Rainville, Martin Vallender, and Amber Renadette. So it asks the board to make a motion to approve hiring for all of those positions.
I'll move. Thanks, Polly. By roll, Kat?
Did you say these?
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
So we have resignations in FNESU, Jennifer Doyle, Rita Calsmith. I believe this is a second retirement for Rita Calsmith.
Yes.
Melissa Miller, Ashley Shepard, those are special educators that I've just listed. Nancy Bunyo, special ed, Megan Barrett, speech and language, Elizabeth Smith, speech and language, Misty McCartney, literacy intervention, Karina Stanley, second retirement also for Karina, literacy intervention. Jenny Hall, she's shifting to an intervention role, science role at the high school, so she's resigned her literacy intervention role. Hugh McKinney, he's gonna be moving to, he's resigned because he's moving to a locally paid position in his school. Holly Crispell, LEAPS, she's the site director in Bakersfield, and Eva Valenta, LEAPS site director in Berkshire.
I forgot Heather Hawkins.
Oh, yes, you're right. And Heather Hawkins. I'll have to add Heather.
No, she's on there. You-
Oh,
you
I
just-
skipped it? It
you
wasn't
just
skipped
skipped
it.
it.
I skipped it. Okay, Heather Hawkins. So Heather is also staying within the FNESU. She's going to be the assistant principal here at the high school next year. So no new retirements to report. We have several open positions. We're looking for special educators, BCBAs, speech board certified behavior analysts, so specialists in the area of behavior, speech and language pathologists, reading specialists, literacy interventionists, math interventionists, occupational therapists. You kind of get the feel for what we're looking for. These are all roles that support our MTSS system within our schools. Early childhood special educator, therapeutic social worker, school psychologist, behavior and SEL leaders for LEAPS, social emotional learning interventionist and coach, social emotional learning coordinator, Heather's role, virtual special ed teacher, and a long-term special ed sub, kitchen assistant, LEAPS site coordinators in 2 of our schools, LEAPS instructors and substitutes for teachers, nurses, paraeducators, custodians, and food service. So if you know anyone looking for work, we have jobs available. The other piece I just want to say, in case anybody out there is listening, we have a partnership going on year 3 with the Upper Valley Educator Institute, and we have I don't have the date off the top of my head, but coming up, I believe next week, May 24th, we have a community Zoom meeting to talk about what they can offer. So if people have a bachelor's degree and they're interested in going into education, UBEI has a one-year program for teacher licensure. They also have programs for teacher leaders, and they have programs for school administrators as well. So what's new this year is that there's a substantial amount of funding available for people who are interested in going that path. And so I think it was $4,000 for people who are interested, who have like a minor or major in education, or had a minor or major in education. There's also merit-based scholarships, and there is money if multiple people from here want to go ahead and get licensed in this program. So it's a really great time if people are interested, and if they do have to take out any loans, we qualify for loan forgiveness, because it takes a little while, but because you're serving in a high needs, high poverty public school, people would qualify for loan forgiveness for licensure programs. So encourage people to come to that, to look for information on our FNESU website, and we should have flyers out there as well. So next up, Mary, sorry.
Sorry, like, can people, like, is that, and I know there's gonna be the meeting, but like what kind of a time commitment is that typically? Can they be actually working in the school during that year that they're getting their licensure? Or does the time commitment just depend on, what they already have for schooling?
So we have, it's pretty intensive in that year. I think they have a half day a week that they have to be in class. It's a hybrid model, so part of the time they have to be on campus, I think one weekend a month in New Hampshire, if I remember right. I might not be exactly right, but they have weekly obligations as well that I think are virtual. So we've had it both ways. We've had people on a provisional license teaching while they're getting the certification, and we've also had people get the certification but not be teaching for us. They ended up, I think, working a long-term substitute
Or paraeducator.
or paraeducators working through it. We do have, if there are support staff positions, we can accommodate that. If they want to come work for us, we will work with UBEI, because there's some requirement that they spend time. If you're going for, as an example, a K-6 license, the first part of the year they need to have opportunities in a K-3 classroom. And the second half of the year they have to have opportunities in a 4th through 6th grade classroom. So we have so many support staff openings that if people are interested in going through that licensure program, we can be flexible and work with them so that they can work as a support staff member while they're gaining that certification.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that? So I'm bringing this back to you because you asked me to. Back, I think the first time was in August, the board made a motion to grant me pandemic decision-making authority, and then they reaffirmed that decision at the December meeting and asked for me to bring it back in this April-May meeting. So we're in an endemic response place now, so I kind of put it in your agenda as pandemic/endemic decision-making. So how does the board want to proceed with that?
That's a toughie. Because, here we have, do we have a false sense of security? It's like, that's where we're at. It's like, it's been extremely helpful for you to be able to make those decisions in real time. But in the same sense, it also, negates the role of the board, I guess, is being part of those decisions. But we also don't know, what's gonna rear its ugly head in potentially, 3 months. That I don't know. So,
I mean, I don't actually think,
yeah.
I tend to be on kind of in a more unique camp, pandemic-wise. I don't truly believe we're fully in the endemic phase of this, and numbers are skyrocketing in New York City right now. Government's predicting in the fall 100 million people across the country are gonna get COVID again in the wave that's coming. Now, those are predictions, it's so impossible to say. So, but given that, I mean, yeah, I think we're in a little bit of a lull, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty to come, and I think that the need may arise again for decisions to happen kind of quickly. I don't wanna fully like not have any kind of participation in it, but I like, especially with summer coming up,
Right.
if things change precipitously between now and the start of the school year, seems to me that we would want Lynn to be kind of taking account of it and making decisions around how are we going to start the school year based on the current state of play. We do meet in August, right? So we could reevaluate it then and see if what's happening both in Vermont and kind of in the broader kind of national COVID situation.
So just some context in the way it has been, even from December until now, there are times when information comes and it is an all weekend long piece where there's information, there's a variety of sources, there are meetings, there's trying to collaborate and figure out what the next steps are. So the real time piece of this has been challenging, and you don't know when those are coming, and when, if you chose a different direction, it would need to be me doing all of that, bringing you all in for special meetings, and it would require that 24-hour necessary level of warning. So it would slow down the decisions, and there've literally been hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of decisions if I really thought about it.
I guess what and this is only where it's just so kind of nice and easy, that at what point are we going to be like, no, give it back, right? And so I guess that's where I'm at, is like at what point do we say, no, we actually have to go through the process? But you're right, like we are not out of the woods, like as far as like real-time decision making, staffing issues or whatever. I am okay with continuing it, but I guess I would give it, I'm gonna be Rick Bartholomew, I would give it another end date to revisit, I guess.
I think that I don't know if it would be give it back to the board or end it,
Well, that's what I mean.
because
That's
it
what I'm, yeah.
it isn't typical, we've never had to
Right,
do that
no,
before, so
exactly.
it wasn't like it was something that came away
Yeah,
from the board.
right.
So what is your end date?
I feel like, I don't know.
What about if for the summer months, because we really aren't meeting, we just continue it, and then in August, we kind of assess where everything is, and then decide for the fall semester or trimester?
I think I would even go into the fall. I think I would, because, August is just 2 months away. I would go even into November. Because it's gonna be, we're gonna know by November if we need to take the training wheels off or not. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because that's gonna be
Yeah,
like.
and I suppose that in advance of the start of the school year, Lynn, I would reckon that you would be getting a fair amount of communication from the Department of Health and the AOE in advance of the start of the school year that would warrant you starting to kind of make decisions and sending it out to the community. That's awesome.
It is warm in here all the time.
So maybe, so that summer, that in August, maybe that's not the time for us to then be kind of like, okay, let's make a decision, because I'm guessing you're gonna be already making some decisions come August.
So bring back
So-
in November?
I mean, do you wanna just do it through to the fall, the fall semester, although now we're technically on a trimester, but through maybe until the winter break? Or does that feel like too long, Polly? Is that feeling too
Should
long?
be tied to one of your meetings.
it should be tied to one of our meetings.
So you had you last year bring it back in December.
Yeah,
So I'm okay bringing it back in December.
okay.
Yeah, because then we would be able, yeah, yes, I feel like if we're gonna be in the thick of it, and we'll see if, does it compare to where we've been? Or are we moved a bit beyond, we would know by December. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Linda, is that an action item? It is, right?
Yes.
All right, so I'll make the motion to grant you pandemic decision-making authority from now through, until our December meeting. We'll do that by roll. Oh, wait, sorry, Kat, you wanted to interject, I'm so sorry, and then
No, that's okay. No, I mean, I would just echo what everyone has said. And I mean, I think Lynn has a proven track record of, making really sound decisions. And like she pointed out, a lot of these have to be done in real time, but it's not like she's ever kept us in the dark either. I feel like, we've all been in communication, right on top of everything. So yeah, I think it's a great plan. So
Okay, great, thank you. Sarah, Shaylee, Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
So next up, I think I can be relatively brief on the legislative update piece, but there are some important things that have happened at the end of this legislative session. And I'm just gonna start this by saying the session was frenzied at the end, which I think it typically is, and it's possible I may have some oldish information and maybe there were some changes that I'm not aware of yet, because the last legislative update I received didn't go through the end of the legislative session. So one of the big pieces that I've talked to you about at almost every meeting is the pupil weighting study, and so that is gonna move pupil weights. What they ended up doing was putting a 1-year delay in, so they still have an interest in exploring that cost equity model versus adjusting the historical pupil weights. So that's gonna come back around the next legislative session. Right now, it is anticipated to go live during the 24-25 school year. So we should see the benefit of those adjusted weights. So the way they're going to determine that, because there is some impact, especially to us with merger, about how they get at our equalized pupil numbers. So it is some combination of, let's see if I can describe this well, a 3-year average.
That's the 173 implementation.
Oh, I did mess that up in red. So we want to say that part, that's for the,
So for the pupil weighting, they are going live for FY25, so it won't impact the budget we start building in the fall. As Lynn said, they have tipped that they're gonna look at the cost equity model, which is just a different way to give the same types of money for the same types of kids. The other change on that is the state moving away from free and reduced lunch applications to universal household income declaration form, which it's a big change. It's not all that interesting. We can talk about it offline.
Yeah.
the other piece of that is the last version that I saw was that the people who are going to benefit from the change in weights were going to have access to the full benefit of the adjusted weights in year one, and the people who are not going to benefit, who are actually going to lose in this scenario, there's a 5-year glide path built into this for them. So I think that the average piece, Morgan, had to do with the other part of 173. And remind me, is that live next year?
That is live next year. And so that's this transition how we fund special ed. And in the 5 years to get to the new system, everybody is easing into it either up or down. And it's looking at a 3-year historical average of what you spent per kid on special ed. Because a bunch of districts were complaining about that, they basically took 2 different 3-year periods and looked at both of them, and they're gonna let everybody pick the better one. And so it's gonna probably bring everyone a little bit closer together. It's still the same pot of money that they're dividing over the same number of districts. But it'll be transitionally easier for some districts.
So this is that shift away from reimbursement and towards the block grant piece. So Michelle has already talked about the special ed rule change piece, so 2 of the rules have been delayed for 1 year. There was information that came out about the yield last week, and that was actually good news for us. It is gonna have positive impact. I don't remember the dollar amount, Morgan, but the yield is actually gonna have a 3 to 4 cent positive impact on our taxes. You wanna say anything
Yep.
more about that?
Yeah, so the yields it set at 13,144, which is somewhere around 3.5 cents lower than what we went to the voters with.
So I think we went to the voters with a 5-cent increase, so it's gonna be like a.
Depends on the town, yeah.
Well, I think it was 5 cents Enosburg, 4 cents Richburg, or it's vice
I
versa.
think it was a decrease before CLA, but either way, whatever that figure
It
is,
felt like it was like
it's
a
about
penny off,
3.5
so it's
cents
gonna either
lower.
bring us down to a penny or 0 or ish.
Yep. Which is great news for this year. Less great news when we start building the budget and we start at a lower rate.
Right, because then it's gonna look like, just so everybody knows, it's gonna look like a bigger increase, because we came down so low. Yeah, but we'll take the low for now.
So they did pass a universal school lunch provision. Funding for the first year is built into the budget. They did establish a working group to, this whole household declaration form requirement. They're gonna be working through that, and they're gonna be looking during the next legislative session on other funding streams that could help to pay for the universal meals. The piece that has us paying attention a lot, one of the pieces, is the PCB testing piece that has passed through, and I've talked with one of the boards about this and not the other. So initially, the testing for the PCBs was covered, but there was no money allocated for remediation. So in the last hours of the legislative session, they did come up with $22 million to put towards PCB remediation. The one caveat that they put in there is that you can't access that funding until after January of 2023, unless there is an emergency, and I don't know how they define significant emergency. I have to look into that piece, but so you know of our 9 physical schools, Bakersfield and Montgomery are the 2 schools built after 1980 that will not have to undergo this PCB testing. All of our other physical places will have to do this. So they had a formula for determining which schools should go first based on many factors. Some are poverty factors, and some were age of the building and other data that they had gathered in the survey. So first up is Richford Elementary School, and we're in a testing window with them. Like we found out, the day we found out that there was PCB testing scheduled, we were already in that window. So Richford Elementary testing will happen sometime between now and the end of June. We're not sure how quickly the turnaround will be in terms of the report after the testing window. We then have from July 1 until September 30th of this year, the rest of our elementary schools. So we have Enosburg, Sheldon, and Berkshire all going through the PCB testing in that window as well. And then we fast forward until the next fall, Richford Junior Senior High School in October to December of 23. They're on the testing schedule. In the second quarter of 2024 is Cold Hollow. And in the third quarter of 2024 is Enosburg Middle High School. So we don't know what this is going to mean. We all saw what happened with Burlington. We know that Vermont originally set a pretty high standard for PCB above what the EPA set. So that they have come down on that. We saw some information today that came out about allowable levels and how there's a range of allowable levels depending on the grade level that a school serves. So we would be looking for more information from them about what it means if they do find PCBs and what does that mean in terms of levels. So you can imagine our brains are working pretty hard to think about, you know, what are some contingency plans if this testing doesn't go well. And we don't know if it would result in we can't access a building for a period of time until there's remediation. We don't know if it would result in a project big enough to have to bond. We don't know if it would result in a shift to remote learning or us trying to utilize other spaces within our communities. There's a lot to really unpack. So those things are playing in the back of our heads, and at the same time, we just need to wait and see what they come up with the PCB testing. So what we will do is commit to quick communication about the results and get that out there for our communities. So any questions on any of that? So we did not adopt the school calendar at this board meeting because that meeting was rescheduled. So you have all seen the school calendar at this point. If you have not, I could share it via up there. Is there anybody who hasn't, who needs to see it, or are we good?
See it.
Okay, so be looking for a motion to approve the school calendar.
Make a motion.
Thanks, Sarah. By roll, Kat? Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
Morgan, could I have sharing rights?
Sure.
So I'm going to share this next part with you. So when you created the SU board goals, we talked about me bringing back a monitoring plan. I'm bringing to you a monitoring plan draft tonight. Oops. Sorry. Not the right one. Hold on. So we took a look at, oh, that is very small, isn't it? I'm gonna just give this to you as an example, and I can share this document with you. So we took a look at, if we have to project out for the year, what are some of the spotlights that we think we should be bringing to you throughout the year at the SU level. This is definitely in draft form, and let me just start by saying, this is one of the things I would propose that we work on during your board retreat, is finalizing this and whether or not you feel like you have adequate data represented in this board monitoring report to feel good about being in the know in terms of where we are with the board goals. So the first part is highlighting by month the type of spotlights that we would be bringing to you to report out on. And we actually don't have all of the months for board meetings. The next part is we took the 3 goals. So we took the literacy goal, the proficiency-based graduation practices, and the SEL goal, and we thought about what is the data that is connected to each of those goals. And then we looked across the system and thought about what would be the most important data to give to the board at regular intervals throughout the year so that you can have a really solid sense, you know, outside of, you're always gonna get that SBAC data, but outside of that, what other data do we have that is demonstrating our growth in terms of getting all of our students to proficiency? So there's a lot of acronyms. I will tell you right from the beginning, this is filled with acronyms because every assessment we use has an acronym. So we can unpack all of these at the board retreat, but the major thing to walk away from this is, this would be by example for the literacy. We would share with you at the start of the school year data from a spring screener. So we'd be able to see where are we with, it's what's called our STAR assessment. Jen Hubbard has presented at the ER board meeting about STAR assessment, and I think that we've seen it in some other schools too. So we'd be able to look at that by district and really take a look at how close are we getting to our targets. The next piece we talked about is that connection to early childhood and how important it is to really be developing some of those early literacy skills. So the TS Gold is the teaching strategies gold that we use for our preschool program. And they have what's called the BELS, the Vermont Early Learning Standards. So we would ask that we have a report out on our literacy data for our pre-K students in September, and then you would have another look at STAR data for fall, and then there are some other literacy assessments that are embedded in there as well. So that's one example. We have work to do on the proficiency-based graduation piece because we're rolling that out. The portrait of a grad, we have to unpack a little bit. What are those assessments going to look like, and will we have pre-assessments, or are we building pre-assessments for that? In terms of social emotional learning, we unpacked the types of data we would be looking at. And one of the things that we haven't had great data on is each school has tracked behavioral data differently. So one of the things we think is important is to bring it into a system that everybody's reporting the same way, so that we can really unpack and look at what are the discipline referrals in each of our schools, and can we track whether or not the things we're putting into place are resulting in fewer discipline referrals. So that's something that we're embedding into that EduClimber system that we are using to get all of our data in one place. So, for example, in September, we would bring you information about discipline, exclusion, and suspension data. We also would bring you data about Rule 4500. So, Rule 4500 is part of our policy, and is part of a state policy around if a child is unsafe and are at risk of harming themselves or others. There are times where we have to physically restrain a child for their own safety or for the safety of others. So we have to report out on that if that happens, or if a child goes into what's called seclusion, we have to report out on that to the agency as well. So we would be reporting rates of the 4500 data. We'd also be looking at like functional behavioral assessments. So you kind of see the idea of this. There's other data we just have a history of reporting out on throughout the year, so we try to capture all of that as well. So looking at provisionally licensed teachers, we like to have Jamie give you that report out in September. You always hear from principals about October 1 enrollment numbers and class size reports and exit surveys and things like that. So we have tried to embed all of that. I'm just gonna make this a little smaller. And I know you can't really see the words, but one of the things that we're trying to crosswalk is not overwhelming a month. So we know that when I know when I look at September, it looks like a lot of things are in September, but they're like little tangible data bites. So it's not something that you're gonna have to go incredibly deep in for that month.
So I would make the same argument, I guess, for the spotlights, because like there's one with 3.
It is, yeah.
And that seems overwhelming to me. Having 3 in one meeting.
I think we generally aim for 2.
Yeah.
So we would move that in our
Okay.
draft.
Or unless the rest of the agenda was light, then whatever.
But we have some where there's just
Yeah.
1, 2.
Right.
So this is our working draft, so I wanted to bring it to you to get feedback. Are we headed in the right direction? Actually, that was 23, 24, this tab. You can see across the bottom, we've got 22, 23, so you can see that these are the reporting areas that we would do for 22, 23, and then across the bottom, there's data for each year. So we would be building on the data we bring to you. So if you're good with this model, we will keep working in this direction and bring it to the board for the retreat this summer. Seem okay?
Yes.
Okay. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle and Jody to talk about our portrait of a graduate work.
Move over here so I can see the screen better.
Hey,
So this, I have to give credit where credit is due for this lovely, visual. Courtney, that's something Courtney's been working on, so it's our kind of draft in progress right now. But you'll see, in this visual, around the edges of the visual are all of the different characteristics that we have identified in our portrait of a graduate, which we're asking, for the board tonight to consider adopting these as our graduation requirements, starting with the class of 2027. So we'll kind of go forward and share that with you. This is just a timeline of kind of where we've been from the beginning. So in the fall of 2019, the board directed us to start working on Portrait of a Graduate. And in the spring, between the fall of 2019 and the spring of 2020, we convened, I think it was a number of students from all the towns, 14.
It was 14 students,
14
yep,
students.
from all 6 towns.
And they went through a rigorous process of collecting data. I think someone told me there were 500 data points at one point that they were really analyzing and collecting to determine what was going to be important as far as our what we're going to promise that graduates will exit FNESU knowing and being able to do.
So they worked with a consultant, just since I know not all of you were here, they actually worked with a consultant to interview business owners and business leaders in the different towns, parents, students, community members.
Higher ed.
Yes, higher ed, our legislative representatives, and created a bunch of surveys and other tools to solicit data about what our communities valued and what they felt like our graduates should, what skills our graduates should have when they leave. Mm-hmm. And then they compiled that data with the assistance of the consultant and came up with some characteristics.
So they came up with the 7 characteristics. We'll go through those specifically in a minute. The next step was to put this work in front of a committee of educators. So we had a team of educators from across the district who reviewed and considered all of that. They came back to the board with their recommendations for implementation and how to move forward. That was in the spring of 2021. The summer of 2021, the board identified an implementation committee who started work over the summer. The intention was to continue that work this year. The pandemic has changed the way we operated a little bit over the course of this year, and we can talk a little bit more about that process. But the committee had asked us to come back to them and the board with some models to kind of consider, looking at the seven characteristics and how they interacted with our proficiency
with the academic proficiency characteristic, which the students didn't necessarily feel that they were qualified to take on, so they wanted to send that back to the educators to kind of decide whether academic proficiency was something that lived within the characteristics or stood alone.
So we had a small group of people, Jody, myself, and one teacher leader, working to take those characteristics, come up with some different models. We did have a couple of different models. What kept becoming apparent was that our having an academic proficiency, like 8th characteristic, was really overwhelming. Trying to put all the academic proficiencies in one section was a lot. And so we've actually found, and I'll show you, Jody's going to go through the model itself, where those proficiencies are going to live within those characteristics. So that's kind of where we're at today. We're looking for the board to adopt these as our graduation standards as a draft. You know, we're still in sort of the drafting mode. We're working on getting them in front of students and teachers to get feedback, but we have a pretty good sense of a working model at this point. There may be some few tweaks, I think. And then looking forward from next year through 2027, when we would expect the first set of graduates to be exiting Franklin Northeast under these graduation requirements.
So this is the model, the draft, of what the portrait of the graduate would look like. The things that are in color are those characteristics that came from the work that the students did with our towns. So those should look really familiar to you. Those of you who have been on the board for a while, you've seen these a few times. And the bulleted things underneath are actually a subset of our currently existing priority standards. So as you know, the State Board of Education has adopted standards for each of our content areas. And then our content groups here did the work of identifying a subset of those standards to be our priority standards, the ones with which we will intervene first. The ones that we are making a commitment to ensuring proficiency for all students with.
Why were some underlined and some?
Because the ones that are underlined are actually links.
Oh.
And that represents a next step. So when it may not be a live link in this slideshow, but in the other document, it's a link, and I can talk about what's there in the link.
It should be, you should have received a link
I did,
that's
I-
live.
they're
No.
all request access.
Ah! We'll have to fix that. I'll go through and fix that as soon
Oh,
as we're done.
some aren't,
Okay.
some aren't, yeah.
I
Okay,
may not be able
gotcha.
to fix them all actually, because you may have done a lot of them. But we can change that access so that it's anybody. So yeah, those links are, work that we've been working on this year to start to create evidence and create single point rubrics, to identify the expectations.
So in terms of the process of this, we first took a look at the priority standards themselves and saw where there were really clear matches. So for example, the trustworthy characteristic, you can see one there that says, I exhibit responsible personal and social behavior that respects and promotes success of self and others. That was a currently existing physical education priority standard. And so that was a really clear match to the description of the characteristic of trustworthy. In information savvy, for example, there's one about I can construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, and that's a math practice standard. So there were some that already were existing that were really very clear matches. So that's where we started. And then there were some that were not very clear matches. And so we do have those mapped back, though, to the indicators that you see here in the Portrait of a Graduate. So the other priority standards that are not reflected here on this Portrait of a Graduate, they are mapped back to these indicators. So students would be working in their classes with their teachers, learning the other priority standards, and their evidence would be based on these indicators, but the work that they were doing in classes would lead them up to a place where they had evidence like this. So this is probably 10th or 12th iteration, because we took, every time we had a model, we took it out to stakeholders. We had teachers look at it, we had students look at it, we had administrators look at it, and at this point, all of the teacher groups, with the exception of 3 of the high school teacher content groups, also have been able to review it and give feedback. Because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to have all of those meetings, and so the math, science, and English teachers have not yet, as a whole group. Individual math, science, and English teachers have seen and given feedback, but as an entire group, those groups have not met yet. So there may need to be minor changes once those groups have had a chance to meet. But other than that, this has been through several iterations and gotten lots of feedback from lots of different stakeholders. And some of them also, I do want to say, some of the indicators that you're seeing are combinations of existing priority standards. So I can communicate effectively in writing and speech, that's several literacy priority indicators that have been combined together. The ones that are underlined, those are links. If you are clicking on them, they go to a proficiency guide. The proficiency guide describes proficiency criteria, and then in some cases also has models of proficiency, of proficient student work. So that's the next step as we would be moving forward, is to have the content teachers come with proficient student work. We can, as a group, take a look at that work, articulate what the criteria is for proficiency, and create a model bank so that parents, students, teachers, everyone can see exactly what proficient work looks like. Oh, the other thing I didn't say that's really important is we also did color. Originally, all of these indicators were also color-coded. It got really overwhelming, so we fixed that. That was to make it really obvious which ones were which content area. So there were some, all the math ones were green, and all the literacy ones were blue, and all the science ones were red, and it was that way, but then it got just, very overwhelming with all those colors. But we made sure that we were attending to having all of the required content areas reflected.
I think it's good.
So, yeah, is there any conversation? I feel confident.
I can share a little bit more about the next steps in summer,
Okay.
like some of the work we're gonna be engaging in this summer.
Okay.
So there's essentially 3 different levers that we're looking at kind of moving into to start to push this work forward. One of them is working on advisories and personalized learning plans. So that will be students' strengths, interests, and aspirations are going to be used to create and refine their learning plan. Those are currently required in grades 6 through 12. They're in a variety of stages of similarity across the district. So one of our goals is to get some toolkits this summer where we can start to really help to streamline those and make them consistent across the district so that all the schools are working on the same sorts of plans.
And this is a
same
direct
structures.
connect back
Yeah, go ahead.
to Act 77.
Another section that we're going to be working on is student engagement. So we actually are going to be working with pulling together some student leaders, looking at advisory and advocacy work related to topics like equity, curriculum, policy, and government. We're looking to create a youth adult team to build capacity for more youth voice in leadership and support of this portrait of graduate. A lot of the students in the student design team even identified that they haven't had a lot of opportunity for voice and choice in their learning, and they haven't had a lot of opportunity for real independence and agency in their own education. So that's something that we really want to start to pull together and work a little more intensely on. We're also going to be looking into an asset-based advisory system and looking to help make that more consistent across the schools. An asset-based personalized learning plan structure, so some of those different areas. And then the third bucket, so to speak, is around proficiency-based learning and really leaning into universally designed first instruction. I think Lynn's talked about that several times tonight already, where students are working toward clear lesson targets, being able to self-assess and access multiple means of representation, expression of their learning. And they're going to be building an evidence bank for proficiency, so looking to demonstrate evidence as they're moving through the grades. And it's not just a high school initiative. This needs to be started in the pre-K. So we're going to be working on all the things that are building up toward graduation from the beginning of our system. So this Portrait of a Graduate is not a high school initiative, but it is a pre-K through 12 project.
And there are models of what a K2 portrait of a graduate, a 3rd through 5th grade, a 6th through 8th grade portrait of a graduate looks like with the standards from that grade level. They're just really still quite messy, so.
Yeah.
But they do exist, they are in the works, and they aren't quite as pretty as the pretty model we just showed you.
One of the things I think we're envisioning is that there will be sort of passage points. So at the end of, let's see, 2nd grade, there'll be some opportunity for some student-led conferencing where students are really, and we've started doing some of this work already, but really students are taking responsibility for sharing their progress and sharing their evidence with their parents around the work that they've been doing. And then we're thinking like at the end of 5th grade, the end of 8th grade, probably once in high school, like a 10th grade point before the high stakes sort of graduation expectation. So there's points to practice and points to be building that evidence bank all along.
And this is a model implementation timeline, it's just a model. So what we could do, or what we've started to do already actually, is to strengthen some of the structures that our students would need in order to be engaging in a proficiency-based graduation system and things like student-led conferences. So this year we had a lot of our schools and a lot of our students participated in student-led conferences, and that really is, you know, a way for the students to start to take that ownership of their learning and setting goals and having evidence. So we would continue to build our PLP, our personalized learning plan, process and our advisory process for our students in middle and high school. We would build teacher capacity for proficiency-based learning strategies, and then those student-led PLP meetings. And we have some summer work groups working this summer with teachers to actually develop advisory materials that they need, and a more consistent PLP format so that it can work grades 6 through 12, and also on proficiency-based learning design as well. We have some teacher groups that are working on that to build some units that could be accessible to all of our teachers. And we would continue with that with professional learning through several years. So potentially the freshmen in 2023-24 could use their classwork to create evidence of proficiency for a portfolio that could be verified in real time. And then again, that happens when they're sophomores, they continue to do that, and then there's a review of the evidence that they've developed over 2 years and has been verified by those appropriately licensed teachers. So where are you with in relation to these graduation requirements? Which ones have been verified? Which ones have not been verified? And of course that would happen within the context of that discussion with the family and with the advisor about what are your goals post-high school. And so, for example, if a student knew that they wanted to go to nursing school, right, they would need to be making sure that they were verifying, some of their evidence sooner, so that they can participate in some of those higher level classes and whatnot, and make sure that they have the content necessary to pursue those post-graduation goals. And then juniors, again, would continue to create evidence of proficiency for their portfolio, and then the seniors would present that evidence in a kind of a capstone presentation for those of you who have done those before, and graduation would be based on that evidence that's been verified.
Sounds good. Sounds like a heavy lift.
Well, we actually started the work in 2014, so it's not completely foreign, for sure.
Right.
We've done a ton of systems work since then, so we've been positioning ourselves to be able to make this shift. And I think you're gonna hear more about Portrait of a Graduate. We were actually just at a conference together, and they talked about Portrait of a Graduate. For those of you going to Learning 2025 this summer, you're also gonna hear about Portrait of a Graduate. It's something that partway through our work on our Portrait of a Graduate, the agency came out with Model Portrait of a Graduate. And we're seeing schools around the state start to do some work on Portrait of a Graduate. And an organization called Battelle for Kids comes in and works with schools, and they've done this across the country. So it's something that is gaining momentum, and you're starting to see more organizations actually articulate what it is the graduate leaves with.
So one other connection I just wanted to make is you probably noticed that some of those indicators in the Portrait of a Graduate were also the priority standards for social emotional learning. And that really is an important piece. One of the characteristics that the students in our communities identified as really important was emotionally intelligent. Another characteristic that our communities and students identified as, very important is that idea of trustworthy, of other people being able to count on you. And so that's where those social emotional learning priority standards kind of cross in, is making sure that students all do have those skills necessary to manage their responsibilities and to become trustworthy and to, be emotionally intelligent and those other characteristics.
So you're looking for a motion to approve. Anybody have any questions or like need a direction? Questions?
I'm really impressed. I mean, it's really been a pretty deep process, and I love how much buy-in that the students themselves had. I remember this was before the pandemic when they came in and we had that big discussion, and so I know this has kind of been a pretty big arc to get to this moment, and yeah, I think that it really resonates with me for sure, as far as the kind of the whole picture. And that tie-in between obviously core academics, which are paramount, and everything else that we all need to kind of carry with us into the world to be successful in whatever kind of arena that we move in after graduation. So yeah, I appreciate it. I know it's been a really heavy lift. It's great work.
That's a good point. I mean, you know, I've seen over the years kids who are amazing at content, but can't navigate, you know, sometimes just daily life, going to an interview, holding down the job. Well, I mean, we were even talking to one community member who's a vet who said, I have somebody who just came out of vet school who is an amazing knowledge as far as veterinary medicine. You know, vet school's not a short time, but can executively function through their job. And so a lot of this hits on some of those pieces, so I think that's completely important. So I would make, oh, sorry, go Kat.
I love this, like, I just love this. And I also think this is like a pivotal point for our whole SU as far as kids being able to, you know, just kind of take a new role in their learning and just have such a more vested interest. And I think it all ties into the goals. And, you know, if the kids are interested and the kids are kind of taking more this bigger role, I just can see it tying into even like dropout rates and things like that. Like, you know, I love this. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited to see this.
So I would make a motion to pursue with this portrait and graduate work.
Great. By roll, Kat, Sarah,
Aye.
Shaylee,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you both.
So next up on my agenda is the end of the year calendar plan. So for those, we experienced a lot of ups and downs with the pandemic, and we had a point in time in the fall where our numbers really escalated right before the Thanksgiving holiday in November. We ended up having to close schools for 3 days in all of our schools. Teachers worked that Friday to prep some remote work, so they had a work day on that Friday. So they had 2 days off. At Richford Elementary School, they had one additional day, I believe it was in February, that we had to close because they did not have adequate staffing. So Richford has one more day, Richford has 3 days. So I wrote a waiver to Secretary French. This is one of the things that was outlined through the pandemic, is that if we had to close and we were not doing it preemptively, we were doing it because we were either not having adequate levels of staffing or it basically was we were not having adequate levels of staffing. And so he forgave the days for the students. He does not have the authority to forgive days for teachers. And I don't feel as though I have authority. I do not have authority to forgive days for teachers. So the question has come up from the union. They're requesting that those days are also waived for teachers. So I did do a little poll with superintendents from other parts of the state. Many of the superintendents are not waiving days. Some are waiving days and just saying the student days were waived, the teacher days are already waived, just an acknowledgement of what kind of a crazy year it has been. And some places are saying let's split them. So we'll do some professional learning for part of the time and forgive part of the time as well. So I need a direction from the board, because this board is the only board that can modify the teacher work year. So right now, all of FNESU has 2 days to either be forgiven or made up or some combination, and Richford Elementary has 3.
So wait, let me get this right. So when you say teacher days, you're talking about like in-service at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay, and so how many days are at the end of the year for both schools?
2 or 3.
So there's 2 in-service days at,
No, hold on.
No.
So you're talking about what's embedded in the calendar?
yeah, isn't that what we're forgetting?
No. So if.
Oh, because of the 100 and whatever days.
186. So teachers
see what you're
have in
saying.
their contract
I
186
see what
work
you're saying.
days. So the teachers, if they fulfill everything else in the contract, there are some schools that have like a half day in service at the end of the year. If they do all of that, most teachers will be at 184 days at the end because of those 2 November days. The Richford teachers will be at 183 days because of those November days. So I need guidance from the board about what do you want me to do with those days? So in anticipation of this conversation, I've had Jody and Michelle put their heads together around, we would not, if there was some ask that there was professional learning time, we'd not make it cognitively overwhelming to end the year with. There are some things that they have, I can't take credit for this, put together that we feel like would set teachers up for the next year. Do you want to give just some examples of some ideas you've brainstormed?
Yep, so there would be a block of time where we could pull, like, for example, those teacher groups who haven't, as a whole group, gotten to review the portrait of a graduate, we would be able to pull them together in order to do that. Also things like the way that our professional learning was set up this year, it was strands that teachers were engaging in by choice, and they were supposed to have been able to kind of share out with the other teachers in their building what their learning strand was, so they could hear what the other teacher strand was as well. So for example, we had elementary teachers who were doing a science learning strand this year, and elementary teachers who were doing a social studies learning strand this year, elementary teachers who were doing a writing strand this year, so that they could share out what their learning was with one another. And again, because of the pandemic, that is something that has not happened, so they would be able to go back, review that learning, and do that share out. So those types of professional learning activities that aren't necessarily new learning, you know, right at the end of the year when people are really tired. And so new learning might not necessarily stick as well. But doing the reflecting we were supposed to do during the year and didn't get to because of the pandemic could be really useful and valuable.
And some other time in the classroom as well.
Yes,
We talked about
in the
giving
classroom, yep.
giving some time in the classroom to tie up loose ends and wrap up the year. So I just need direction. Does the board want me to forgive some or all of those days? Or turn them into PD days?
My recommendation would be to split it. Maybe 1 day off and 1 day as a PD day.
Yeah. I would not put 3 PD days. I would not put anything through that.
So we do 1.5 for Richford and 1 for everybody else?
Because Richard had that one extra one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to no fault of their own, it's like no staffing. But yeah. What do you think? So that would put them at, so students are gone, that would give them how many in-service days at the end of the year? If you had to add 1.5, how many do you currently have in your calendar?
That's school specific.
Not more than one.
Well, that's
A
what
lot,
I'm asking,
yeah.
like you got a week or
Like
3?
No.
No, 1.
Some schools, but not all, have 1 day after the last student day
Okay.
that's embedded in their calendar, so no one has more than 1.
Okay.
So it
So
would
it'd be
be
an additional 1.5.
for Richford an
An
additional
additional
1.
one.
for
Richford
everybody else.
Elementary, right?
Just Richford Elementary.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah.
Do you need is that an action item?
Yes,
Then a
you're
motion.
modifying the work year.
Okay. So I'll make that motion to split that 1 day on, 1 day off, and Richford Elementary is the 1.5 day on. Do that by roll, Kat?
Sorry, can you clarify, so is it adding more than their one traditional day that they typically would have on?
For some, yes. Because some people have that day after students leave in the calendar as a wrap up for the year, so that's all local principals work with teachers on that day. So for some of them, it would be the day after that,
And you're.
or that day would get pushed
That
back.
day would
That day
push.
would get pushed back, yeah.
How do you feel about the motion on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanna, cause it's like no fault of theirs, and so it just feels like a little punishing to make them go more than what they are like used to be on the students' last day. So that was my only concern is, how is that received?
I mean, so my feeling, being on the other end of that, is to make it like clean out your classroom, right? Make sure your grade books are all in order, make sure your grades are reported, and here's some lunch, right? I wouldn't put them through like
Not high cognitive.
high cognitive, yeah.
It just seems like what's the point of coming in for 2 days? Like, what are they doing?
What's the point of
coming in
point
for
of
2
them
days?
coming in? Talk about prepping materials for new teachers coming in.
Right, so one of the things that often happens, when a teacher's leaving and a new teacher's coming in, the materials are not, they're not like put together, the classroom is kind of packed up, so the new teacher has to go hunting for resources and things like that. So we brainstormed some of those things, just kind of a checklist of make sure you go in. A lot of teachers do it just naturally on their own time anyway, but making it more formal on those days that they take the time to go in, look at their classroom materials, create wish lists for professional resources, for classroom books, things like that. So really giving them time to do some of the things that they don't necessarily all have time for generally.
And it's kind of like a snow day. That's no fault of anybody's either. And you have to make up those days, you know? That's kind of, but I'm also sympathetic.
Snow days, and these are COVID days, correct?
Yeah.
No school!
So we already have those snow days already embedded in.
Yeah, but like I just feel like we've talked so much about how grueling like the last 2 years have been, and I just hate to like just add one more thing like, oh, and by the way, you got to stay an extra day beyond the extra day that you usually stay for the kids. But if everybody else is like okay with that, I mean, I don't need to fight this either, but I don't know.
You should vote your conscience. Vote no.
Okay, well, I'll vote no then. Never even thought of that. I've never. Anything. Like, oh wait.
Right on, there you go. Okay, Sarah. Shaylee.
Aye.
Polly.
Aye.
Mary is an aye. It's always okay to vote no.
Exactly.
Truly. Okay.
Sorry, I lost track of my thought for a second. The last thing is the support staff side letter. So Morgan and I were going through some things today and realized because that meeting was canceled, there were just a couple of things hanging out there. And one is you had agreed when we did the teacher and staff recruitment retention strategy session back in February to approve the $2 an hour for the support staff, but we never had you sign. So be asking you to grant Mary authority to sign that side letter for the increase in support staff compensation to begin on July 1.
I'll move.
Thanks, Polly. By roll, Pat. Sarah. Shelley. Polly.
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
And I'm done.
All right, great, thanks, Lynn. So we can go through central office updates, go kind of quickly. Dominic, do you have anything you want to highlight or add to yours?
No, I don't think so, unless anybody has any questions about it, but I didn't have a whole lot on there.
Yeah, okay, great. Jody, anything further from you?
nothing further, and unless anyone had questions.
Okay,
I know it was pretty meaty,
it was, it's good.
lots of links.
Gotta love the links. Michelle,
I have nothing to add.
nothing to add? Michelle Irish,
Nothing to add.
anything to add?
Wait, question?
That has a question.
Oh, yeah,
I have a question, sorry, for Michelle Irish, I don't know if that's what Michelle, you were just asking.
yep,
But I couldn't open the link for the Speak Up in School campaign, this poster, I was trying to open it and looking to see if we got it. So I just didn't know if you could send that poster to us, or just give us a
Absolutely.
quick, overview of what that.
I think because it was a PDF, it might not have been linked right, so I'll just have Doreen send that out. Thank you.
Okay.
all right. Heather, how about you? Anything you wanna highlight or add? Okay. Jamie?
Nothing to add, no questions.
Okay. Thank you. Dawn?
Nothing to add unless you have questions.
Okay. Melissa?
I have nothing to add.
All right. Robin?
Good.
You're good? Gabby, Gabby, oh yeah, you're with us virtually. You have anything you'd like to highlight or add to your report?
No, I don't need to add anything, but just, there is a link in there to the new library, just Brittany's done some of these and we're writing, so get a chance to read some of their books.
Yeah, it was one of our,
Yeah.
It was one of the links in our packet.
Okay. The sound is a little weak. Okay. Is Vern still with us? Yep.
Zoom on it.
Oh, yep. Vern, anything that you'd like to highlight or add to your report?
Oh, did
He was kicked out for
2 hours?
Oh, transformable. I said you got on at the right time.
Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. And Heather Hawkins, you're good. You
I'm
did your
good.
deep dive.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, let's see, anyone have a future agenda item in the moment? Oh, well, we'll have to get to that in a
Yeah.
second, Polly, yeah. Teacher negotiations, potential ratification votes.
So last week, we met for the 4th time with the teachers union, and we were able to come to tentative agreement. And so now we're at the place where the teachers union is going to do the ratification votes in each of the schools, and we have to do the ratification vote at each of our boards. So you sent the agreement out.
Yep. So I sent out by email 2 copies of the agreement, the clean copy, which is what the negotiation committee is proposing we approve. There's also the markup, just so you can see where things have changed from the session prior. And then there are 4 side letters that are going with that. 3 are side letters that we've been carrying forward for probably 10-ish years now. And they arose from when we took the 6 separate master agreements and merged them into one, made some reductions in benefits and grandfathered people who had already been here for a while. We can turn it over to Sarah and Mary, who are both on the negotiations committee. We can give you the 1 million foot overview or the 10,000 foot overview. Are we off for it? Or, you guys see fit?
I mean, well, I had to bow out a little. I had a veterinary emergency but you know, I had to bow out a little bit at the end, but
So, I mean, I can do the very short
think-
story.
yeah, why don't
Which
you
is,
give the recap, Morgan?
It's a 3-year deal. In terms of money, there's a significant increase in salary in year 1. We were able to push that all to the base. The base is that point at which we hire new teachers. So that's an area where we've been struggling. We were kind of second to the bottom in terms of the districts that we compete with. And so we're able to bump that up and move it up in years 2 and years 3. in exchange for that, the two big things that the board got were an extra workday in year 3, and then the ability to send out renewal contracts 2 weeks earlier. So those of you who've been tuning in at your local boards know how that later contract date, which was added in probably 6 or 7 years ago, has really hampered us in terms of competing with other districts during the hiring season.
Right now, the language, yesterday was actually the deadline for anybody who asked for an extension, so it's really late to just find out that we have openings, so. Right.
Mad Max, Thunderdome. That's what it feels like. So do you need a motion on that, on the contract?
Yep, a motion to ratify and direct the chair to sign.
I'll make that motion.
Great. By roll, Kat? Sarah?
Aye.
Shaylee?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Polly, why don't you wanna do this one?
Sure, so, we had talked about prior about the superintendent job description. I made hard copies because I know how that goes if you want a hard copy. I sent it to you about a week ago. So, if you want one, there you go. And then send down that way. if you want 'em. Yeah, you can have one, sure. Thanks. So basically, the job description that we had in the past, which we found out, what, 2 years ago? When we dug out the job description, it looked like it was from 1982. It was pretty antiquated, and it was a lot of the roles and responsibilities around the superintendent in that job description were just their relationship with the board. You know, communicates with the board, talks to the board, asks the board, like that's the only piece in the whole job description, it felt like. But as we know, the role of a superintendent is much more than that. It's, you know, basically like, programming, it's leadership, it's financial, like there's so many other pieces to it. So, contacted the Vermont School Boards Association and they sent a model policy, which basically is exactly this. The model policy, which aligns with statute, because there's statutory requirements for a superintendent. And then there were some small changes, for instance, you know, under business and finance, because Lynn works so closely with Morgan, we just changed oversees and collaborates with the business manager, because they seem to do that in a pretty collaborative way versus you just in a very small school making you the budget, right? And presenting that. So yeah, it's basically that. It's the model policy. And again, this is sort of for feedback for you to go through and take a look at and see if that's something that you feel fits. That being said, which my bad teacher move, I should have handed this out all at once. So this is the evaluation, and so all I did was I took the bullets from the sections of the job description, okay, and then created the rubric to go with that. So you can see under standard 1, which is board and superintendent relationship, these are the pieces of that, those are the standards. And I pulled out pieces from all of those bullets and put them into the rubric. Yeah, and so you can also see, so the intention is looking at the job description, understanding if our superintendent meets these requirements, if so, to what degree, and then there's board feedback at the bottom. And that's that. So,
I think
again,
you're missing one part, which is wake up at 4 o'clock.
and make the snow day
And
call.
make, I've had to do that once. super stressful and it should be listed on here.
I think that's operational management, actually. So,
Keep this really big packet by your bed.
Yeah. That's the only thing she stresses about, and she has to cover for me.
Yes.
There's snow in the forecast.
Please don't leave if there's snow.
that's so funny. Yeah, so you know what I'm thinking, Mary?
Yeah.
I'm almost thinking, so we had originally talked about, giving this to the board and having them look over, and then potentially calling a meeting in June to do your evaluation. And so then we were talking about the process being that if there's anything that, the superintendent disputes in our feedback, that they would have this summer or a couple months to present evidence that says, actually, no, I do these things, right? But I'm almost feeling like we can put it off till August. What do you think? Do you think it should be?
Well,
at
and
the
we
end of-
just made a superintendent formed a superintendent eval committee, so it doesn't actually sound like it is gonna be the entire board. It sounds like it's gonna be the three at Shaylee, you and myself
okay.
doing that, so we can do it
Oh,
independently
that's true.
of a board meeting.
Then maybe we should do it before the end of this school year, or by July.
And then would you come back and allow the board to have an opportunity to give feedback to your draft?
I would think so. I would think
To
they would
the
want to do that.
evaluation, Lynn, bring it
Right.
to the
So
whole board.
You'd have a committee that would work on it
Yeah.
and bring a draft back to the whole board, and then would you ask them
And say, would you
to
agree?
review and add or?
Yeah, because then it's an evaluation of three and not evaluation of four.
Right.
Yeah, so it would have to come back.
I mean, historically, we didn't, I feel like the last time we did it as a whole board. So
We
this,
did do it as a
this
whole
is
board.
kind of a newer, this committee we just formed is new for us as a board.
Right.
So, I'm fine if we do some legwork in the preliminary and then bring it to the board, but then I'm wondering, is that an extra unneeded step? And maybe revisit having the subcommittee.
Well, I feel like the subcommittee could do the legwork,
Yeah.
right? Coming up with here's examples of where the superintendent has met these standards.
Right,
Right? For us to do that in a meeting,
true.
right?
Yeah.
And then we can just bring it to the board and be like, do you agree with our assessment of this? And if not, then how come? And if so, great.
Okay.
I feel like that seems to be the better process.
Yep, that sounds fine.
So I wonder if the subcommittee, like, it's the timeliness thing I'm kind of wrestling with. I'm not looking to, the subcommittee meet in June. But then we don't have another board meeting until August.
So maybe we do it in the fall,
I think
in the
so.
fall, meet in August independently of the August board meeting, and then we bring it to the
To the
board in
board.
September.
Or we could, because if we don't need to do a quorum.
Right.
Sorry, you're at a family meeting, you're all stuck at the family meeting. We could maybe meet in June, the three of us, we could even do it virtually, right?
Yes, that would be great.
And then bring it to the board in August
Yeah,
for
let's do that.
feedback. Let's do that. Does that work? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and so for the rest of, Kat, yeah, I was like, and Kat, I think I sent this to you, I think you're on my list. Just take a look and see if there's anything you're like, yeah, you forgot this part, I would really like to see that, or if there's a part that you feel doesn't need to be there, just let us know. But yeah.
Okay. Polly, do you wanna, reach out via email and
Yeah.
we'll find a time to schedule that
Yeah,
to the two of us?
yes,
Okay, perfect.
yeah. Okay, so that's it.
All right. So then as far as a couple of the remaining items is we're gonna get a doodle out for board retreat times. We do not have a meeting in June, meetings in June or July, so our next meeting will be August. Any other remaining things before we adjourn for 2 months? All right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn and wish everyone a really wonderful, safe, healthy, happy summer season. Pat, all in favor? You're good? All right, thank you all so much. Have a great.